Welcome to the Going Deep podcast. Brandon Angelo, Matt Waldman with you.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello. We have a lot of topics to cover this week. I mean, from benchings to trades to elevations to um, rookies playing well, rookies not playing so well, or maybe not as bad as we think, or maybe worse than we think. I don't know. We're going to try and sort it all out. Let's start off with the topic of the week, which is Anthony Richardson.
Oh yeah.
You watch the game, and you watch the past few games, but you watch the games with him, and certainly there are throws into coverage that he misreads the coverage or he misses the dropping player. You see passes that are not pinpoint accurate, but you see also passes that are very catchable that get dropped. He's he's definitely a go for broke type of player right now in terms of he's aggressive downfield. He's also getting blitzed a ton. We know that compared to Flacco, he was getting blitzed more. Um, but that Houston game, I mean, I don't know, man. I went and looked back at that, and I know somebody said there were 8 drops and 2 touchdowns that could have been. Then well, I went back and looked at it, and I would say there were 5 that were clearly catchable. There was a
Yeah,
pass interference from Michael Pittman that I'm not sure I would have called that as more as incidental contact, but
sure.
that was a third touchdown that should have been his.
Yep.
He could have had legitimately a 17 for 32, 275-yard, 5 touchdown day if
Yeah.
his receivers came through for him in that game.
Yeah.
And all we've heard is he tapped out
Oh,
on,
that's been
I mean, listen, Brian Baldinger is an institution on social media, and former Colt line. He's a
yeah.
he's
He's
a
awesome.
trench guy, awesome guy. I saw him light into Anthony Richardson about that, and somebody tried to cordially debate him about it, and he shut that down and rudely. If you would,
Yeah, I saw that.
I
I
was
did.
just like, okay, so that's the scene. You want to take that anywhere
Oh
you want to
man.
go.
Oh, I mean, and you and I have talked about Anthony Richardson since he came out of Florida,
Yeah,
right? So we know the type of player he is. We know also too they drafted him when he can barely drink alcohol. Like this
right.
is this is a kid that is still the youngest starting quarterback in the NFL that's active. Youngest, right? So we're talking about a player that still has a massive developmental arc. I think the frustrating part about this is not even the Richardson stuff in terms of the tap out and even his field of play, right? It's the lack of structure in the organization in terms of transparency. That's the biggest one for me is, you know, you watch the interviews of the news coming out, right? I've listened to Michael Pittman's, right, in particular, leader on the team, found out through social media. Okay. Josh Downs didn't know. Zaire Franklin's a podcast, I think. Listened to him. Had no idea that Anthony Richardson was benched for Joe Flacco. Um, the fact that your team, the players, have no clue that you just made a seismic shift in your organization to bench the 22-year-old who hasn't even played 11 NFL games, who has less than 250 pass attempts. You're benching him. You're not telling anybody. Some guys found out during walkthrough. That is a massive black eye to the organization when you don't even have the transparency to let the leaders on your team know, let alone the whole team. I mean, if you're, Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard, I mean, the first thing you're doing, and I think Dave Canellis did this right when he benched Bryce Young, right? You told the team, had a meeting, right? Said, hey, we're going with Andy. Fine, totally get that. I respect that, right? If you're making that decision, it's better that everyone know how, helps them mentally to prepare and emotionally if they have questions, right? Instead, you have Josh Downs at his locker getting visibly frustrated with reporters because he didn't want to see that switch. right? He didn't want to go from Richardson to Flacco, right? And a lot of guys too, listening to some of the interviews, they were shocked but also kind of perplexed, because if you look at what Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard said when Richardson was drafted, I like listening to when players get drafted out. I always listen to the interviews of the general managers and coaches. It's something I just like to do, more so to kind of see, hey, what developmental plan do they have for this guy set in place? Do they have one set in place? What's kind of the path forward here for the rookie? And I'll remember Shane Steichen's, because he said, quote, I think the development of players comes with more experience. When you play more, that's when you develop. And Chris Ballard went on a whole tangent about Terry Bradshaw, which is hilarious. And he was talking about, we don't expect Richardson to be Superman in game 2, game 3. And he references Terry Bradshaw for another 5 minutes about how he took so much time to develop into a Super Bowl champion and we're behind Anthony. And then you do something like this, where you take the 22-year-old kid and say, we're not behind you anymore. And I think it's more a Jim Irsay thing than anything, right? I think
he
Jim
watches too much ESPN.
Yep. I think Jim Irsay is the one who pulled the plug, because, and I think it was so sudden that it was you're doing this right now or you're going to be definitely fired. I think that's the sense, because there was no indication going into that game versus the Texans. And it's not a game where you got blown out or embarrassed by a good Texans team, right? You lost by 3 points. You dropped five passes. I mean, Michael Pittman Jr. is out there. He shouldn't even be playing.
You were pressured 64% of the time.
Yep.
And you made plays against multiple defensive linemen corralling you in the backfield,
yep,
and still being able to find open men downfield.
Correct. And I think the worst part about this is you look at the skilled players beyond Jonathan Taylor and Josh Downs, right? This is a wide receiver group that is in the bottom 10% of the league in drops, bottom 5% of the league in average depth of separation.
Yep.
I don't care if you have Joe Flacco back there. I don't care if you have prime Peyton Manning back there. If your receivers can't separate and they drop passes, you're not going to win very many football games offensively.
And you're not going to get those passes off if you
Nope.
have either of those two guys getting pressured like that. Now, at the same
Correct.
time, they're not pressuring Flacco the way they're pressuring Richardson, because they know they can blitz Richardson, and he has less experience with that. So there's a
He doesn't
little
have the
bit
blitz
to
answers,
you said about that. But at the same time, your best separator is maybe Adonai Mitchell, and he can't keep his feet on a route.
Nope. And that's the thing too, is like, Chris Ballard has $25 million of cap space. You went into the season with this receiver room, right? You drafted Adonai Mitchell, albeit he fell. I think it's a good spot for him to develop, but he's not a consistent down the down player right now, which is fine. He shouldn't be. But right now you don't have an option besides Josh Downs in your passing attack down to down. Michael Pittman Jr. should not be playing right now. This is a non-starting caliber player we're seeing on Sundays. I don't know what happened with the back. I don't know what the medical, because remember.
Yep. They were going to put him on IR.
Put him on IR. Anyone from being put on IR to know I'm playing on Sunday.
2 weeks ago.
It was, I went back and watched the game against the Texans. And I'm watching Pittman Jr. And I think it was either Chase Daniel or Dan Orlovsky who pointed out too that number 11 should not be playing.
Yeah.
Like, this is not a starting caliber X receiver. Can't come back to the football, can't keep his feet in a route, like looks like he's running in mud. But then, the tap out happens, and then everybody's talking about that, which I get it. He's young. He has to learn. That's not what leaders do. You can talk about it till you're blue in the face, but no one wants to talk about, you have a supporting cast that you built for this kid where there's no structure, right? You don't have a number one receiver right now. You have a slot receiver in Josh Downs, who's a great separator, right? But you can't win playing 11 personnel football when you're really a 12 personnel team. And that's the tough part about it is if you're a 12 personnel team and you don't have an X receiver, it's going to be hard to win games down the down and build off play action and do things of that nature. But it's a very sticky situation because I think what loses the locker room is not the tap out. What loses the locker room is a lack of transparency surrounding decision making. And I think that is what is happening. And I think at the end of the season, Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard are going to be fired. And this is going to be a very interesting job to monitor, both those jobs, because who's going to want to be kind of the puppet of Jim Irsay? And that's the very difficult thing. Kind of similar to what we see in Dallas in a sense too, right? Who's going to want to be the puppet of Jerry Jones? And that's the tough thing is like when you're told you have organizational power and managerial decisions and you don't, that's a really big shift. And that's something I think we're seeing in Indianapolis. And I think it's gonna backfire because you're gonna go 9-8. You might make a wild card game and you might get blown out in the first round. And then you're picking 17 in the first round. You don't get a blue chipper. Set you back. And that's the thing. That's what I think is going on here in Indianapolis.
No, I mean, what you outlined is great in the sense of this. When you add it up, Michael Pittman shouldn't be playing. Why is he playing? Because somebody's instilled the mentality that they need to win now. That this is the playoffs. We don't care about Anthony Richardson. We have Joe Flacco. We have a chance to win in this division. Nico Collins has been hurt. Stephon Diggs just tore an ACL. The Jaguars receiving core we'll talk about later. They lost Christian Kirk and two other guys are banged up. Parker Washington might be their best receiver on the field, at least because he's healthy, him and Evan Ingram. Then you look at the Titans, they're a mess because they got rid of a good coach, and their GM's a bit of a mess too. So you look at this and probably Jim Irsay thinks, we're going to win the division. We could win the division. We might be able to take on Houston. This is a big game. We've got to be able to do this. So you're pushing Michael Pittman to play. You are expecting a rookie quarterback to perform at a level that he's just not going to do at this stage, and he's done pretty well, I would say, considering the situation that he's been in. And on top of that, you're looking at the whole notes of how people are reacting on ESPN. This is a classic owner move. Owners watch more media and react to more media than anybody in the organization, from what I hear from scouts. And
for sure.
And it's a common thing, and it's the saddest thing because there are a bunch of fantasy owners who they play fantasy football with billions of dollars, and that's the problem. And so you look at this, and he wants to win now, and he's impulsive. And I love that you brought up Terry Bradshaw, because last week at Football Guys, I compared Anthony Richardson statistically after 9 games to Lamar Jackson, Cam Newton, and Josh Allen. And the numbers were, whether you looked at touchdowns, touchdown rate, interception rate, sure, all of it, yards per attempt, everything, all on par with those guys. Yeah. The best pocket passer of that group was Lamar Jackson. The wildest, the guy who was the biggest wild card as a runner and the biggest runner of the group was Josh Allen. Cam had the best start, but he also had Steve Smith, and a veteran team. And then his numbers plateaued pretty quickly, and he still had, Pro Bowl seasons and got to a Super Bowl. There's 3 right. MVPs between these 3 guys. Well, then if one of my friends, Jason Wood, over at Football Guys, ran some numbers about guys after 10 games, and the list that he came up with was, guys like Terry Bradshaw and John Elway as the best of the lot. The most were guys like Bubby Brister and sure, folks who just were never going to be good. Now, my point about a lot of what I look at here is that when you're going to compare players and pull up a data list of stuff, I know a lot of the data people will say, well, the numbers will all wash out, whether it's apples and oranges. But I would say Not when you're looking at a talent like Anthony Richardson, because then all you do is you look at the numbers and you mistakenly look at somebody and say, well, all these guys are like, not that good other than maybe two players. So Anthony, maybe the Occam's razor, simple story here is that maybe Anthony Richardson just isn't that good. Let's throw out all the nuance. Let's not think about football. Maybe Occam's razor on this isn't that maybe we look at all this data and it just shows he's not that good. Maybe Occam's razor is maybe you need to learn more football so that you don't have to look at data that's just a big word jumble. It's really just a numbers jumble of bullshit when you look at that. Instead, maybe we should pare down to players by archetype of what their skill sets present when they enter the league. Who was bigger, faster, stronger armed than any other quarterback on the field in those eras that you're looking through? And the two names that showed up, John Elway and Terry Bradshaw. None of the other ones even remotely compared to Anthony Richardson. These guys were that kind of player when they entered the league compared to other quarterbacks. You could say the same thing with Josh Allen, Cam Newton, and Lamar Jackson. And all what those five players have in common is that they could physically take over a game with their arm or their legs, or a combination of both. And what they had to learn was to know where their boundaries were, what to try, what not to try. Because they had, I hate to say superhuman, but superhuman type of, as close to superhuman type of traits as you see. And
Sure.
and when you have to bump up against these types of, at this level, you've got to see where you pushed the envelope too far and when you didn't. Because if you've been known to have limitless physical potential and you've been able to do things that just make no sense, on a football field, you have to learn where you're going to pare this stuff back. Right. So it makes sense that Anthony Richardson is 2-3 times a game making throws that nobody can make, and and maybe 4 or 5 times a game making throws that nobody could make but nobody should make.
Right.
And trying things like that, because you have to kind of find your way. If you looked at Muhammad Ali as a boxer, and with his rope-a-dope style, and every boxing trainer would have told him, and they did during the fight, don't do it. What are you doing? You're getting the crap beat out of you by George Foreman. But he knew what he needed to do because he knew he was quicker. He knew that he could handle it, and he knew he was quick inside, and he was superhuman quick as a boxer at that weight. So he knew his envelope that he could push. He had already figured all that stuff out early on in his career. But you have to know yourself that way, and there wasn't anyone like him, so he could get away with that. Well, there are a few people like these 5 quarterbacks in the combinations that they're at. They have different combinations with what's going on. So Bradshaw, when we look at him, he was that type of player, but he got benched multiple times by Chuck Noll. And multiple times.
Multiple.
That might have been one of the best examples of intermittent playing time that I've always been talking about for the past 10 years. That would be the thing that players need to do. So, or coaches need to do, and organizations need to do, is say, you know what, Anthony, they should have come in here and said, instead of making definitive statements where, Jim Irsay is saying, look, we're on the expressway with him, we're going to be out on the highway, we're not going to be able to make many stops, and then suddenly now, well, Jim, and whatever age he is, had a Slurpee and realized he's got to pull over because his prostate's acting up. So, that's, you get impatient and impulsive, and one of the things that they should have done, and I love your point, is the plan they should have had was, look, Anthony, we're going to start you, We feel like you're ready to get some playing time. But we also feel that there are going to be moments where you're going to try and push too hard. You may try and push too hard. You may try to do things that are reckless, and you may not manage the game. We're worried about how you're going to manage the game at certain points, and we're trying to instill some of these things in with you. If you screw up some of these things, we're going to take you out of the game so that you can see somebody else handle it, a veteran who also early in his career could scramble and run and throw the ball a mile, who came from a small school, and after he kind of was a flunky out of Pittsburgh and ended up at Delaware, moving on. And you're going to see what a guy, a polished, refined guy does. And if we get close, we're going to put you back in. This is exactly what Marty Schottenheimer told Drew Brees repeatedly in San Diego. And Brees credits him for his development because he got intermittent benching and starts. You're our guy. Don't worry about what anyone thinks or says. You're our guy. You're just not seeing the field well, and we don't want this to get ingrained. We don't want you to start seeing your play deteriorate. We don't want to look into the future and see this guy that I don't know his name, something called Sam in New York. I saw in my crystal ball talking to some guy named Adden who looked like he was coked out of his mind and going, I see ghosts, and Adam's seen other things and isn't even listening. And we saw what happened there. I mean, when your quarterback comes to your coach and says, I see ghosts, that's the canary in the coal mine. That's and you're just staring off in the distance, probably going, I'm counting my money right now. Be quiet. I'm trying to figure out if I can still pay for my house when they fire my ass. But those are the things that happen. And I think with Richardson, it's far from over for him. Everyone knows he's a worker. I've talked to his coach, his quarterback coach. He keeps meticulous notebooks on everything, and he's unbelievably organized at what he does. It's just a matter of gaining both experience and getting time away to see. And hopefully Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard aren't running so scared that they haven't taken the time to at least talk to him and say, look, dude. Now, Stephen Holder reported no one in the organization is worried about his professionalism, even though he was really upset about this. But the lack of communication, you're right, as a team, what that says is that this was a unilateral decision by an owner who probably would give Jared Jones a run for his money and impulsivity.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't have said it better. I think it's just it's a tough situation for Anthony because and the team too, because even talk about Ballard and Steichen. Like Steichen came into this job understanding part of his role, and a large part of his role is developing Anthony Richardson.
Yeah.
Right. And kind of rolling through that, and that failure will stay with him for the rest of his coaching career too.
Yeah.
And that's something too. I don't know if Irsay understands that part. It's not just about, it is about winning games, but also too, it's about creating a culture so you can win games year after year after year.
Yeah.
Like look at Detroit when Dan Campbell came in, right? They were in shambles.
Yeah.
Just creating a culture where there's transparency, but also too, there's a sense of respect and awareness to what's going on around you, right? And not everything is universally accepted. There's a way to do things within the building and how to handle things. But when it can't be done from the top down, then you're never going to get a good on-field product. That's why the Dallas Cowboys haven't won in God knows how many years.
Yeah, because if your ego runs amok and you think you're the emperor of Rome,
right?
Then this is what happens, and you're totally on that. And I think too, at the end of the day, with Richardson, what we're going to need to see here is, can this team, I mean, really, I guess with Irsay, his ego so big that he's not going to be willing to listen and get people, and that's probably going to be the case based on what we've seen. I mean, the guy, I mean, I hate to say this, but the guy acts like he's in a midlife crisis when you see him on Twitter. I mean, it's like some of the things he's shown with pictures and doing stuff, he's acting like he's like an 18 or 19-year-old.
Yeah, it's not, and that's too, like, when you talk about leadership from the top down, like, it starts at the top, right? Like, that's the biggest thing. Like, it starts at the top, and if he can't, and also too, like, if he can't say, hey, I had a hand in this decision.
Yeah.
We all sat down together and democratically agreed that this is what we want to do. This is how we want to move forward, but also too, we love Anthony. He's the future of the organization, but this is our new plan to develop. Yeah. I think everybody would respect that and be like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Like, we recognize that it's a democratic decision. You guys are all in this building together. But when it seems like it's forced, like Shane Steichen, he looks like a hostage on stage.
Yep.
And he's like, this is my decision. Okay, Shane, we know it was not your decision.
Yeah.
Like, no one believes that this is solely universally your decision.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a tough one. And biggest thing too, when you go to the Cleveland Browns, right? You go to the quarterback decisions that they had to make now with Jameis Winston at the helm, because Deshaun Watson now has a ruptured Achilles and his career is in doubt. But that's an interesting one because Winston's given that Browns team life.
Yeah. Let me ask you before we go to Winston, because we definitely need to do that. I have to ask, as a former college player, to me, when you think about the tap out, when we watch, it seemed like every announcer who was a former player pretty much was ready to like take the player card away from Anthony Richardson because of this move. Now, I understand from afar that football is a collision sport. It is a physical sport. There is the idea of having a warrior mentality. And I understand that people talk about the warrior mentality after all. Now, only one of my 3 kids who are in the military actually was in combat or dealing with combat. So I would think, I haven't seen a military veteran in the NFL since Rocky Blyer?
Been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. I'm not questioning the toughness of NFL players. They're plenty tough, and it is a very difficult sport, and you have to play hurt, and it ruins your body, and you're dealing with constant pain, and there's an era of that is very much, there's a part of that is very unique, that is unique sport, like contact sports, collision sports, conflict sports have a unique aspect to that.
Sure.
And I would never want to downplay that. But when somebody starts talking about warrior mentality and they're not in a life or death situation, it smells like shit to me. Like there are people who've it kind of reeks a little bit to me. I mean, I think that they've taken it a little too far. The dude also, as Zaire Franklin said in his podcast, the dude's been shaking off defensive linemen on a repeated basis. Maybe the only sin he committed is that he should have lied. And here we are.
Universally, that's what I've been held. For me, like, I was a college athlete, but I wasn't a football player. But, on my end of it, if that was my teammate, right? I would be like, what are you doing? Like tell the half truth.
Yeah.
And the tough thing is, Anthony Richardson was just so green about it.
Yeah.
So ignorant to the fact that do like I could see the media person just in the back, just like, do not say that. Like, do not say it. But I mean, like he was just so transparent about it. Like, it was kind of like a breath of fresh air in a way. It's like,
that's because here we are. We want our people to be honest and transparent, and we want people to be stand-up, accountable people, but lie.
And like we've literally seen like Antonio Brown like literally quit on his team at halftime. Like middle of a game actually, and just leave.
Take off his pads.
Like we've seen so many crazy things in the NFL that got scrutinized at the same level as this decision. And for me, it's like this. Look, if you are an NFL player, and Anthony Richardson is one of the more physically gifted players in the NFL, if you feel like you are physically unable to be on the field, there must be a really good reason. Because, I mean, everybody's been lauding his competitive nature and the way he works. And
go watch the Aaron Donald hit he took where he completed like a 40-yard pass with Donald buried in his chest.
Like he literally threw off of him a 300-pound lineman, and it's the end of the drive. Like, look, I think he should have been like I also think he fell on the ball, which is kind of, if you watch that last play beforehand, like got the wind knocked out of him. But like he's like, man, I was tired. I'm like,
but and it's so funny though, because I would say this: the closest player to him in recent eras is Steve McNair. Okay, who might very well have been the toughest quarterback who's ever played football. I mean, maybe not, but one of the most seen that way perception-wise, as one if people would call him a warrior. Bruised sternums, taped up, having to get wheeled off of planes in a Hannibal Lecter out like a, dolly, wheeled off because he couldn't move, and then he'd go out and play and win for them. If Steve McNair said, I needed a playoff, people, the media might have gone off on that, but I bet you every player in the NFL would have told them to shut the fuck up. I mean, like, I think if, like, maybe not rookie Steve McNair, but 8 year career, 8 years in.
It's crazy because now we're we're in the age where a lot of players have podcasts, right? You listen to Micah Parsons, and I asked him obviously what he felt. He's like, man, I always told him to lie. That's just lie about it
because they all do. They all do. They all lie to the media. They all do.
Yeah, and it's not like there wasn't a player that in my when I was listening to all the players talk about it, no player's like, no, he should never have said that. We would not be behind him locker room. They're all like Zaire Fagan's like, dude, just lie.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's okay. Like you just freaking threw off a 300-pound lineman and just threw a rope that got.
If you were Zach Wilson and did that, that would be one thing, Yeah. Unless you got killed on a play, and then you should have lied. But this was, you're right. I mean, this highlights how disingenuous former players are because they're getting paid a shit ton of money, and they need to create controversy in the media.
Well, yeah, because it sells, and that's the biggest thing. Is that's what kind of I thought J.J. Watt had a really eloquent way about saying, it's look, I get it, but he should have lied and been no, I fell on the ball, man, I got the wind knocked out of me, had to come out, okay, but that's, I mean, it's such a, it's an overblown situation. People are like, oh, that's why I got benched. I don't think, I'll be honest, people in that building really care.
No, they don't,
because they know look, he literally didn't feel like he could complete the next play, and it was also 3rd and 24.
Yeah.
You're gonna run the ball and try to get into better field goal position. You're not gonna try to risk taking a sack there. So it's
it was a farce. The whole thing was a farce.
You're not gonna. It's not like a goal situation.
Yeah,
it's not 3rd and goal from the 8.
Yeah,
and you're like, Joe, go in. No, the whole thing is just
3rd quarter too. Yeah. And I think all it really highlights to me is that we like to talk about football as people are an example and that these guys are heroes. And every potential hero in every potential town was on national TV or on a national podcast saying he should have lied. Yeah. Think about where we are. I'm just, let's compartmentalize this for a minute. Think about look, this is not as big of a deal as other things we're going to talk about, but I just want to end on this point just because I think about our society, and everybody laments about where our society is on one way or the other. Whatever side of the thing you are, we lament about it. So-and-so on this side's not honest. So-and-so on this side's not honest. They all think that. And you're looking at our playtime, our entertainment, our sport, and we drape it in the flag and the military, which has to fucking pay for the opportunity to actually do these displays to the NFL. But that's another story. The whole wraps ourselves in being in patriotism, and we want to celebrate these people, and all of them are saying to lie about this. Why? Because vulnerability is weakness. Because vulnerability is weakness, when really vulnerability is a strength. And I laugh because Anthony Richardson is naive about this. And you said it was refreshing, but that dude, yes, he's gotten hurt, but that dude's taken a shit ton of punishment, and he's fucking strong as shit. And he's the one that's going, I'm not gonna lie, I was tired, because he's thinking to himself, who the fuck's gonna question me about this shit? Did you see what I had to do out here?
Yeah,
it
was actually funny because it was the first game against the Texans they played.
Yeah.
And there was 2 plays in one drive when he gets absolutely crushed. No, after play, no flag. And I'm sitting there watching him is he gonna get up? He just gets up and walks to the sideline. I'm like, did the spotter not see? He's probably concussed.
Yeah.
And I'm okay, that's ridiculous that he just got up. I'd be in the ICU if I took that hit.
Yeah.
And he's gotten up and he's gonna go back in the game like nothing happened. So questioning the kid's toughness is ridiculous. All of it's just very overblown. I think players in his own organization do not really care about that as much as they care about the lack of transparency behind the benching.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of from an idealistic standpoint, because we always hold these people up in an idealistic fashion, but there's pressure everywhere to basically hitting gopher holes or whack-a-mole on don't be honest, don't be vulnerable. This is what a man's supposed to be. This is what a warrior's supposed to be. But we don't have any warriors who are even on the field in the truest sense of what that is.
Right,
I mean, there's some. I'm sure you can name a handful, but you're probably the smartest guy in the room who's doing that right now, because I can't think of anybody.
No.
The last guy I know they quit. It was Pat Tillman. He quit football for a while to go do that.
Right.
And died. And paid the ultimate price. So, but anyway, thank you for indulging me on that, because I wanted to go there. We took a lot of time with this, but you brought up Winston, and the fact that Winston was the quarterback 3 because the Browns brass didn't want to hear his name chanted while Deshaun Watson was on the field was as snowflake of a move as you could possibly get.
Oh, I mean, we were talking about, bad organizational infrastructure, and that's one of the ones too that, I mean, man, but that's why they didn't bring back Joe Flacco. If you heard the stories, they literally didn't bring back Joe because they knew in practice he was that much better than Deshaun Watson, and they were absolutely right.
Yeah.
Now they have no choice, and they want to start, they want to start Robinson, right? He's hurt, But then Jameis Winston won a game against the Ravens, who are the best team in the NFL, them and the Lions right now. And now you can't go back. But I think Jameis brings, a breath of fresh air in terms of on-field play.
Yep.
He's going to take risks. He's going to take chances. They don't have the most talented group of receivers, but you know what? I think Cedric Tillman's a dang good player who, his injuries in college kind of caught up with him, and we never got to see kind of how good he could be at the collegiate level. And now he's a starting X for them. And you know what I'll say is they moved him around a bit in that game.
They did.
And he made some plays in the slot, and he's quickly becoming the primary target of Jameis Winston. I think it's a breath of fresh air for, Elijah Moore and David Njoku and, our favorite running back of all time, Nick Chubb, right? I mean, I think it's just for that team and for the foreseeable future, I think Jameis is the starter. I think going into next year, either you draft a quarterback early, if you have a top 10, 12 pick, and they sit behind Jameis, because I think he's kind of earned it.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, he's paid his dues. It's kind of like Geno Smith in a way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I get it. I was going to say Geno paid his dues, right?
Yeah.
And developed himself into a starting caliber quarterback, minimized the mistakes, and there's sometimes here and there where Geno is kind of like the West Virginia Geno in a way, when you just say, what the heck was that? But like there's most of the time, I mean, Geno Smith has been I think he's still leading the league in passing, and I don't know if Jameis is gonna be as good as Geno is currently, but I think that's kind of the trajectory that we're kind of going. Is that you have a capable starter who will take risk and that can win you big games. Deshaun Watson would not have won you that game.
No, not remotely.
And not even close. But I don't know. I mean, I really like that offense with Jameis. Cedric Tillman's a great piece. I'd imagine if they had Amari Cooper.
Yeah. But here's the thing. I'm with you. And as a Browns fan, last week was the first. Actually, was it last week? This week. This was the first game I actually watched this year as a Browns fan.
I love that.
Yeah. So, let's talk about this a little bit. What I saw, I'm with you that Tillman is absolutely the primary guy. They will run a lot of they because of Kevin Stefanski's offense. Stefanski got hamstrung with Watson, who's more of a pistol guy. And while they ran more from center with him, he's not great under center.
No.
Winston is a natural under center drop back quarterback, which meshes perfectly with Stefanski's offense and allows you to do a lot more in the play action game. When you're running back, running downhill from the eye or a deep eye or a set with your quarterback under center, the play action's more effective. The run game is more effective usually as a result, because there's just more time to read and you have ability to kind of get in the flow. So that's all positive, and that meshes well with the play action game. And now you're creating, especially with the two tight end sets, or you just do different things with the linemen. You're able to get into cover 3 and cover 1 situations where you get one-on-ones, and all you have to do is read the safety rotation, and you get a one-on-one with Moore or with Tillman. Tillman ran a lot of slants and had a lot of openings because they could get into those situations. Elijah Moore they put outside, and Winston hit him repeatedly on deep outs in that game. And Moore is a good enough route runner. He definitely can run the timing routes for you. He can function outside, especially in the way that they're doing this offense. And Winston is spreading the ball around. He's also doing something no one in Cleveland has ever done that I've watched, which is you have David Njoku, who was always a top-end athlete who can jump high and control his body. You see it as a runner. And all they ever fucking did was run like over routes and seam routes and sail routes. And no one ever threw a tight coverage, go up and get it, David.
Yeah.
Go up and get it. Like
No 50-50 stuff.
I've never
Ever.
seen him have to do that since he was at Miami. And that's why I liked Njoku, is I thought at the very least you're going to get some of that. No quarterback they've had has done that until Winston. First play of the game to him was an over route that he threw that in very tight coverage, and Njoku made a leaping extension for it. And then there was, I think, the touchdown that he had, if it was a touchdown, where he it wasn't an accurate throw, but it was put up there enough for Winston to go over the back of the defender and pluck it away. And when you have that kind of player, you use him that way. Not even Flacco was using him that way, I don't think. I may go back and look, but this is the first time I've noticed it since Njoku's been an NFL player. So you think about how they're spreading the ball around. I think Elijah Moore is an underrated player in this look because they're using him in a variety of ways that are going to help him get openings because of the way Winston plays. Tillman's still the top receiver of the two, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's Moore who ends up outplaying Judy or kind of keeping Judy
for
back
sure.
and forth in terms of
I
the numbers.
100% agree with that. I think Moore is the more steady player out of those two. Judy was always kind of a work in progress, right? If he can learn to not be more of a freestyle wide receiver in a sense, right? He was always kind of like the Dante Pettis-ish, right?
Yep.
Which is great and bad at the same time. And unfortunately, Judy has never really developed into the player we all wanted him to be.
Yeah.
But Elijah Moore didn't really get a fair shake in New York, in my opinion. He could be a really solid number 2 or number 3 for an offense.
Yeah.
And I think that's not a bad trio in Tillman, Njoku, and Moore.
Yeah.
Paired with Nick Chubb as well. Like, that's not a bad offense that's going to keep you in some games. And I think, as much as Jameis can throw you out of some, he's going to keep you in a lot. You can battle with some, especially if that defense stays healthy. I think the tough thing is Denzel Ward has a 6th concussion. That's going to be a big blow to putting a blanket on some of the number ones in the league because he's playing some really good football right now.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's going to be a fun offense to watch. I think they're going to, create explosive plays. And I think as Nick Chubb gets healthy, that run game gets going a bit and they play some good ball down the stretch. And
it takes a weight off. It takes a weight off this organization not have to be asked every week about Deshaun or have to hear every week about Deshaun Watson and how, because they live in that town and they know how the fans live and die football there, and they all hate that Deshaun is there. And if you don't think that's not an anchor, they've had to put on a good face and be good teammates. And if you don't think that's been painful for them,
I think it's been I think it's been brutal, and I think too that's the reason Amari Cooper's not a Brown. I think you play so much better. The whole offense clicks so much better with Joe Flacco at the helm. Right. And I think everybody knew it. The writing was kind of on the wall. I mean, it sucks that it had to come this way, right? With an Achilles rupture where, it wouldn't surprise me if Deshaun Watson doesn't play football again.
Yeah, I don't think he will.
And it's not a bad thing for the Cleveland Browns because I think they can kind of move on and kind of turn that next page.
It's a great thing for Cleveland Browns.
Which is good because I think they deserve something good.
Well, definitely the fans do.
The fans,
the brass, the brass deserves to sell the team. They deserve. They should be forced to sell the team.
And Andrew Berry and everybody else, man.
If there were street justice for this, those guys would be run out of town. Pretty fast. They'd probably be tarred and feathered and run out of town. But
for sure,
or dunked in Lake Erie. But the thing is you look at Winston, and I was laughing because I saw on Twitter some people were like, "Oh, 15-yard completion, 20-yard completion, 19-yard completion, 18-yard completion. Where the fuck was he throwing that football?" And they talk about Winston in that way. But here's the thing about his game that I've noticed since he left Tampa. He's improved his game too. He's worked on his footwork, pretty hard. And you could see even in New Orleans that his feet were no longer lagging behind his body when he was taking drops and climbing pockets, and he was in better control, so he could be efficient throwing the ball when he saw things. So the passes weren't as erratic. He was moving the pocket better so that he wasn't put in reckless situations because he was in better control. And that showed up again in Cleveland. And even the throw that I saw that people were saying, what the fuck, was just literally a miscommunication between him and Elijah Moore, where Moore went one way and Jameis was expecting him to continue going the way that he was supposed, that I think he was
cut off
supposed
his
to
route.
go.
Yeah.
He cut off his route and tried to double back.
Yeah, it happens. And that's the thing, too, is he hasn't had a lot of experience with some of these guys, right? I mean, you're relegated to the freaking third string for most of the year. You have 1 week of practice.
Yeah.
Right? And then you're playing the Ravens on Sunday. To do what he did is impressive, man. I'm really interested to see how this rest of the year goes for the Browns.
For sure. All right. So, Russell Wilson, Pittsburgh Steelers. Obviously, I did some stuff on Fields a couple weeks ago and said this is probably why they're going with Wilson. And the short answer of it is this: they know what they have in Fields. They know they could be competitive, but they didn't know whether whether the offense could be elevated with Fields and really access all the weapons that they have. Even though the weapons may not be as name brand as other teams, you're seeing with Wilson, Calvin Austin suddenly looks like the player that he should have been. A guy that Wilson compared to a young Tyler Lockett in camp. A guy Mitchell Trubisky said 2 years ago, that's the guy to watch out for in this camp. And then he got hurt, and so he messed his hamstring. So now you're seeing him getting used in tight situations alongside Pickens, and now he's drawing safeties or corners who have to play one shade of the field, and the route's going to be breaking opposite that shade, and you're seeing good matchups for that guy. Van Jefferson, even he can be a Jermaine Kearse type of player with the Seahawks, where you can have him run across zones and win in zone, and as long as he catches the ball, he should be all right, and he's getting involved. Their tight end from Georgia, the big dude who can motor.
Darnell Washington.
Darnell Washington.
Yeah, man, he's a load.
Yeah. I mean, they're using the 12 personnel now because
that's a really good 12 personnel team.
Yes.
Really good 12 personnel team.
Because you've got 3 running backs who could, if you said Najee, we're going to give you 25 carries, fine. Jalen Warren, you're short, but you're not small. We're going to give you 25 carries. He'd probably be like, let me prove it to you. And Cordell Patterson, if you said, let me give you 25 carries, he goes, I might get hurt at my age after I do it, but I'm probably going to give you about 6.8 yards per carry before it happens.
I'll give you a mean 9 carries and I might have to come out of the game, but it'll be a good 9.
I'm going to probably break a touchdown and be over 120 yards when it happens, But that's the thing. This team, they can rotate those 3 guys and they can wear you out with that. And because both those, Washington isn't a great blocker, but with his size, he can make do. And Freiermuth is a great inline blocker.
It's a very good. This is going to be. I think the biggest thing is this. It's the down to down consistency. That's what changes with Fields to Wilson, right? Yeah. I like Justin Fields, obviously being in Chicago and watching with the Bears. I think the one thing that, even you see from, Fields to Williams is like the down-to-down consistency when things go right is really good. Okay. With Russell Wilson, you know what you're getting at this stage, and what you're getting is good enough to have a competent offense that can allow the playmakers around him to continue to be playmakers. Yeah. And 2, you can win games in bad weather. That's a really big one, being in Pittsburgh. Because you're not going to make mistakes. Najee Harris looks like this is the best I've seen Najee Harris look in his whole career, right? 3 straight 100-yard games. He had like 140 on Monday night, like 140 total yards.
And the moon balls help with the receivers because that's what
Pickens
Russell does
can
great.
Go up and Pickens can go up and track it and use his control and do what he does really well, it's just a good fit, right? I don't think Justin Fields, I don't think it's the end of Justin Fields' career. I think it's a great stop for him, right? He played some good ball. He put some good things on tape for his next team. And I think he can learn from Russell, because I think what Russell Wilson does is he gives you a field general.
Yep.
And I think that's what if you kind of look at what NFL offensive coordinators are looking for you to operate.
Yep.
That's what you're doing. You're operating.
Yeah, you want to be able to when you see, you don't want to lose 22 yards when you're in field goal position trying to make a superhuman play. You want to take the short stuff when it's presented to you rather than deciding you're going to take the long stuff. You want to be able to know when to throw the ball away. You've got it, and because of what he has touch on the football. So when you think about why it's not just Pickens, because yes, he's the long, tall guy, but Calvin Austin can go up and get it. Van Jefferson can adjust to the football. You got two big tight ends who can adjust to the football. If you create the moon ball shot where you can throw it high, and your cornerbacks have to be more patient about, when to look or how to attack and defend that ball, it's harder for them to do. And that's why Russ had success with all these shorties like Doug Baldwin and Tyler Lockett and Paul Richardson, who might have been,
Paul Richardson.
Colorado
great, man.
Yeah, Paul Richardson. I'm glad Paul Richardson. To me, I have the Brandon Lloyd RSP Invitational Acrobatic Catch Contest, and I would say that Paul Richardson would have been like one of the reigning champs that year.
Oh, man. Brandon Lloyd mixtape is Illinois great, actually. Dude.
Yes.
Brandon Lloyd mixtape is it's awesome.
Yes. To me, he was the best acrobatic catcher of all time.
No, incredible.
Yeah. He just wasn't, if he was as consistent of a professional as he was an acrobatic, he would have been a Hall of Famer.
He was ridiculous.
Yeah. So Wilson we're good with. How about Diontae Johnson? And we look at that situation, and and how are you doing on time? How are we doing on time? Good.
We can go 10, 15 more.
Okay. So Diontae Johnson, and then we've got also Jalen Coker as the possible replacement. What do you think went on here that he wound up as a Raven for a 5th round pick? I mean, the Ravens, to me, at least from a Ravens point of view, I'll say this. The Ravens know their defense is not good right now, and they're banged up on top of that. They don't have much of a pass rush, and their secondary is banged up a bit. I guess they're thinking we're going to have to lead with our offense, and if we lose any of the receivers we have right now who are good, we could be in trouble. So for a 5th round pick, let's get a starting caliber receiver and fortify this offense so that in case that happens, we're ready.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think a lot of it is this, if you're going to win games in the NFL, in the AFC in particular, you have to put up points, right? And that's something I think the Ravens can do. But when you come across teams like the Chiefs, who have the world's best run defense, right? And you come across teams like the Bills that are going to be really tough to play in December. You want to be able to be more versatile offensively with your sets. And I think the one thing that was missing with the Baltimore Ravens, if you look at it, is Zay Flowers, I think, is becoming a star. I really like Zay Flowers. I think he's done a magnificent job of developing into being a number one receiver. Rashad Bateman has done a good job as well as kind of reviving his career. He had obviously that ugly drop against the Browns, but besides that, he's been pretty steady most of the year.
And they doubled down on him contract-wise.
They did.
Yeah.
They said we believe in this guy, and that's really important because I think that gave him a lot of confidence going into the year, and he's played his best ball in his career. The third receiver position is the toughest one for them. Obviously, it's not Tylan Wallace. Nelson Aguilar hasn't been very good or very productive.
Yeah.
I think you bringing in a guy like Diontae Johnson to them offensively tells me that, look, they know they need to be more versatile when it comes to playing January, February football. That makes it so much more difficult because now you have 3 guys that can beat man. 3.
Yep.
Diontae Johnson, still a great route runner. He had a really good early season here with the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah.
Really good. I mean, he was in top quarter of the league in a lot of stats, especially with Andy Dalton. And that's the big thing is he could be a wide receiver 1 for some teams right now. Right? I'm shocked that he didn't go to a team like, and we talked about it before the show, the Cowboys, the Texans, the Buccaneers, for only a 5th. And I think one of the reasons why he left or wanted to be traded potentially is I think the developmental plan for Bryce Young, they wanted him to be the primary guy. And I think he thought he was getting another contract too. Like if he plays well, he's gonna get his money. And he played well. I mean, he played well enough for them to say, hey, we'll give you X a year to be the guy next year and to help some of these young guys along like Leggett and Coker, and to be kind of a veteran with Thielen. But I don't think that happened. I think Dave Tepper is about the Mount Rushmore of bad general managers and presidents. He's up there. But I don't think he got that vibe and kind of wanted out. Right? Either you're going to make me the guy in the future. I'm going to prove it to you. He did. He had a good stretch of games, played well, especially with Andy when the offense was more functional in Canales' system. But I also think, too, he didn't feel like that was going to be a long-term mesh. And I think after this year, he's going to have another decision to make, right? He's either, hey, I'm going to stay with Baltimore for less than other teams will pay me because you're already, you're paying – you're already paying Bateman, and in a couple of years, you're going to be paying Zay Flowers some probably big money to stick around. Or am I going to go to a team that I need my services? Look, if Chris Godwin isn't back with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, that's a hand-in-glove fit with them. But, I mean, it'll be interesting to see, but I think he definitely elevates that offense for fantasy purposes. It's kind of a wait and see, right? You want to see what his role is going to be. I don't know if he really eats into the targets of Flowers, and I think Flowers has, in my opinion, the most solidified role because he's getting a lot of the design touches too, and now he's getting the downfield stuff, which he does better than anyone on that team, in my opinion. Just because of how good he is in and out of breaks. But yeah, it's an interesting one for me, and I think on the flip side of that, Jalen Coker out of Holy Cross. He might be their number 1 receiver come 2025.
Right.
He's working all 3 levels right now. He's winning the ball. He's productive after the catch. He's adjusting when the ball's in the air. Like, he's doing a lot of things that you don't see undrafted rookies doing and putting on tape. And I think for me, when you look at him, he's someone that, if you're a dynasty manager, trying to get in all your leagues if he's on waivers. Because, man, he's someone for me, I think, that could be legitimately down the stretch with a bad Carolina defense. Like, this is someone that could be a wide receiver 3. Right? I mean, he could put up some legitimate top 30, 35 numbers.
Yeah, because when you watch him play right now, what they're doing well with him is they're throwing back shoulders. He's winning vertical routes with his length and getting early separation and tracking the ball well, which has always been a good ball tracker. And he's winning the dig routes. What you're going to want to see down the line for him to really elevate his game is be able to drop his weight in and out of breaks on timing routes. But that's the next step for what he's done right now. It's been very good, and it also probably bodes well for some of his fantasy opportunities there. I think you capped it off on Johnson very well. I would probably predict. I'm probably predicting right now that Johnson's going to be that guy that they're going to break the glass on, maybe as they enter the playoffs more, that we're not going to see him get a lot of great fantasy value unless somebody gets hurt.
Sure.
But I think they're going to use this as a luxury to get him ready, and then they can unleash him against some of these teams that don't know what they're going to have in store. The Ravens will have in store. I'm hoping that's what the Ravens do with him, because that could be a big advantage for them if the defenses haven't seen any tape
Right.
on how they use Johnson, and suddenly they unveil this stuff and Johnson dominates during that span. I would say that would be the secret weapon.
Yeah.
All right, so we have one more topic left, and Bo Nix is quarterback 9 in fantasy, and in the month of October he's quarterback 3, and I know that they played the Panthers, and the Panthers are not a good defense, but he's also faced a number of other defenses this month where I looked at other opponents who played them, and he outpointed guys like Burrow and Mahomes and Carr and Stafford and and some pretty established quarterback names with and better perform. Jaden Daniels in some situations.
Yeah.
I mean, he's outpointed some guys. What have you thought of Bo Nix from what you've seen at this point?
Yeah, I think, when I did his site profile pre-draft and post-draft, I thought he offers one of the best floors as a rookie.
Yep.
And I think it was the biggest older prospect, right? Obviously came in a little older. But I think he can operate an NFL offense. And I think the hand in glove fit with him and Sean Payton. I think Payton's a no bullshit guy, but he's a quarterback's best friend because he will put you in situations to succeed regardless of personnel. And that's a really big deal and pretty rare for a head coach.
And their wide receivers are Cortland Sutton, who's like a wide receiver too.
Yeah. Sutton is yes, you're absolutely right. At this stage in Sutton's career, he's a wide receiver too. Devon Vele might be your best receiver, which is not great.
Right.
They have guys like Franklin and some others back there that are, little Jordan Humphrey, Marvin Mims. These are just dudes, right?
Troutman is an intriguing tight end. He's always been a favorite of mine.
Yeah, I say him. Yep. Had that big one-handed catch on National Tight End Day.
Yep.
But this is going to be a really interesting situation to monitor because once they get a true number one option for Bo Nix, I think he is going to take off. And I don't think they don't even have a running back. I mean, Javonte Williams hasn't been playing well.
Yeah.
I don't think Audric Estime, after he's had two significant enough injuries in the last 12 months for you to be like, developmentally, is he going to reach his peak? We don't know. It's tough. I mean, they don't have a great running back room either.
Yeah.
So, I mean, once they kind of retool the receiver room and the running back room, which I think will come this offseason, or we might see them make a trade at the deadline for somebody. Who knows, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's an interesting thing for Bo Nix long term because I think he's going to be a pretty good player. He's shown a lot of really good things on tape. He's been more precise with his timing week in, week out. I think that's the one thing you kind of watch the All-22. It's he's operating better down to down, right, with the consistency. And that's a really important thing in a Sean Payton-led system. And I think he still has some growing to do, right? He's still missing some open receivers and all that, but he offers you another fourth as rushing.
Yeah. The thing that I love about him is that pre-draft and now in the Broncos organization, to me, he was Mitchell Trubisky with actual field general refinement.
Sure. That's a great,
because he was what when I watched Mitchell Trubisky and everybody was like drooling over what he could be, I would go, yeah, he looked great between the 20s. Inside the 20s, he was awful. He made awful decisions. He was immature about when to throw the ball away, trying to make hero throws he had no business doing, not understanding pressure in the pocket and how to feel it and recognize scenarios or just ignoring them. Bo Nix keeps you from bad plays, and he's like Trubisky, more mobile than you would expect from some people, or some people expected. He's a pretty athletic guy, and he's keeping them in position to win. And that's, the mistakes he makes are honest mistakes. Misread a coverage, inaccurate throw. More often than not, it's not even a misread. More often than not, it's an inaccurate throw. He put too much on the ball. It was too high, a little bit behind, something like that, which to me is more promising. Drifting in the pocket a little bit, where he's prone to want to flush quickly and get outside rather than climb and find his option. But none of these things are like major concerns for development. You're going to hear former quarterbacks talk about it that way because they get paid to do that. They want to keep the soap opera going. And I'm probably being mean a little bit about that. They are used to talking about quarterback play and what's good and what's not, but they're not scouting. That's not scouting, and scouting is also studying what projects well and what doesn't, and how you value things within the scope of overall development. So, it's like someone who's diagramming sentences and saying, well, that writer, ended on a preposition, and he's never going to be, he might never be good or get published or get a contract. That Ernest Hemingway, I don't know, man. He ended on a preposition. I don't think this guy's ever going to be celebrated in the canon of writers if he keeps doing that. That Cormac McCarthy just never uses a comma ever, and he's just got this weird style where he doesn't do that. I mean, I know this plot called The Road is probably like, pretty compelling, but I just, I need more commas in my life because, I mean, that's what some of this happens when I go on Twitter and watch some of these quarterbacks, some of them who were great quarterbacks, some of them who weren't so good quarterbacks, but their football knowledge is great. Their scouting knowledge, they haven't studied scouting. And that's a little bit of a difference to remember. So you're going to learn a lot of football from these guys, but when they start making conclusions, it may be worthwhile to remember that they're still babies when it comes to the amount of experience that they have about correlating footwork to development and what's good, easy for that or not. And a lot of them still have that post office mentality. Well, at the LA Rams post office branch, we did it this way, and this is the way I know, and this is the way, and therefore this is the way it should always be done. And whereas maybe at the Steelers branch, it was done differently, and if they had happened to be with the Steelers instead of the Rams and the Cardinals or the Giants, you would see those types of, you would maybe have a little broader perspective about that. So yeah, Bo Nix he's not just bubble screen Bo, as my buddy Dan Hatman would say.
Bubble screen Bo.
Yeah. My buddy Dan and Alex, who are excellent guys, and Dan obviously former scout who runs the scouting academy, and they do great work, but I joke that he calls him bubble screen Bo, and it is pretty funny, so, but I would say we're seeing more downfield work, and
we are, and not a lot of separation, which is the big one. I mean, you need that. I mean, you consistently need that to succeed. But yeah, I mean, I like what I've seen from honestly all the rookie quarterbacks, man. I mean, I think all of them have played really well. Spencer Rattler not as much.
Yeah. But the top 3 to 4.
The big names in the class have all showed that they can be either mid-level to potentially high-end starters. I think Daniels and May and Williams have been fantastic. I think May needs a little more help.
Yeah, he's getting a lot
more help out of him. He's getting murdered back there. And also, too, Gerard Mayo is really doing a poor job at managing that receiver room.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't be starting KJ Osborne and Keyshawn Boutte. Like, just freaking start Javon Baker, please.
I will say this. I'm going to defend Kayshon Boutte a little bit.
He's been their best receiver, which is not a good thing.
No, it's not. He should be their number 3. He'd make a pretty good number 3 right now.
I think he'd make a great career as number 3.
Yeah, I definitely think that. But he did have 2 big plays in that game at the end of the game to set up the winning touchdown. So
yeah, I can't believe. I mean, Tyquan Thornton still getting snaps is a fireable offense. Fireable offense.
Well, we've definitely talked about fireable offenses pretty much all hour and 15 minutes of this pod, and we definitely appreciate y'all hanging in there with us, especially with some of the vitriol I probably reserved for different things. And I should probably give Brandon some opportunity as a Bears fan with the way people are talking about Caleb sometimes. We'll go there next week maybe, just so that we can put Brandon on the hot seat to let him vent a little bit.
It's going to be the Shane Waldron needs to never call plays again hour.
Yeah. Well, we may get Brandon on the couch for that, but we do appreciate you all for hanging in and enjoying the podcast and giving the feedback that you do. You can follow Brandon, of course, at Angelo_fantasy. You can find him, on Twitter. Check out his site. The work that he's doing there, that he provides on a subscription basis, is really fine stuff. You should check it out on a regular basis. Provides email updates that are informative, educational, help you in your fantasy leagues. You can find me, where to find me. And thanks again, and we will see you in a couple of weeks, and we'll get our Bears on at that point.
Yeah, thanks for that.
That's all right. Look, we had to bring up Cleveland, and then
we did.
Richardson.
We did.
All right.
We did.